Sometimes the biggest mistakes people make aren't what they do, it's who they count out. November 1989. Chicago's most powerful people filled the Palmer House Hilton ballroom in their $1,000 tuxedos and designer gowns. They sipped champagne and talked about millions like pocket change. Then Michael Jordan walked in wearing a navy blue suit from Sears. The whispers started immediately. Polite laughter, raised eyebrows. "Bless his heart," they said. "He's trying so hard." They thought they knew who he was. Just a basketball player. An athlete who belonged on the court, not in their world of real money and real power. They had no idea they were about to witness the birth of a $15 billion empire. What happened next didn't just shock that room, it changed the entire sports industry forever. Because when you underestimate Michael Jordan, you do so at your own risk. This is the story of how a phone call from a man in a cheap suit revolutionized the way athletes think about money, business, and power. How one night of laughter became 35 years of proving everyone wrong. And it all started when the most dangerous man in the room excused himself to make a call. Chicago. November. The gold doors of the Palmer House Hilton spun like a carnival ride as Michael Jordan pushed through them at 8:47 p.m. He was almost 2 hours late, but that didn't matter now. Nothing mattered except what he was about to do. The lobby sparkled with crystal chandeliers that cost more than most people's cars. Women in silk gowns glided across marble floors like swans on a lake. Men in perfect black tuxedos held champagne glasses and talked about money in quiet voices. Michael tugged at his navy blue suit jacket. It was from Sears. He'd bought it 3 years ago when he first joined the Chicago Bulls. Back then it fit better. Now the shoulders pulled tight when he moved, and the pants showed too much sock. "Excuse me, sir." A hotel worker in a crisp uniform approached. "Are you here for the Children's Hospital Gala?" "Yes." The man's eyes moved up and down Michael's outfit like a scanner. "Right this way." They walked through hallways lined with oil paintings of old white men in suits that probably cost more than Michael's car payment. The worker kept glancing back, as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. The ballroom doors opened, and Michael stepped into a world he didn't belong in. 800 people filled the room. The women wore dresses that sparkled like diamonds. Their jewelry caught the light from massive chandeliers hanging from the ceiling like frozen fireworks. The men looked like they'd stepped out of magazines, with perfect hair and shoes that probably cost $1,000. And then there was Michael Jordan, in his Sears suit that was too small and too cheap and too everything that these people weren't. "Oh my goodness," whispered Margaret Steinberg, wife of Chicago's biggest real estate developer. She nudged her friend Janet Morrison, whose husband owned half the car dealerships in Illinois. "Is that Michael Jordan? What on earth is he wearing?" Janet whispered back, covering her mouth with a gloved hand.
"It looks like he bought it at a department store."
They weren't trying to be cruel. Their voices carried the same tone you'd use to describe a lost puppy or a child who dressed himself for the first time. "Poor thing," their expressions said. "He's trying so hard." Michael heard every word. He always did. At 26, he was already one of the most famous basketball players in the world. Kids wore his jersey number. Sports reporters wrote stories about his amazing shots and incredible jumps. When he walked down Michigan Avenue, people stopped their cars to wave at him. But in this room, surrounded by Chicago's old money and older power, he felt like he was 15 again, standing in front of the high school bulletin board, searching for his name on the basketball team roster that wasn't there. Michael. Thomas Whitmore, the event host, appeared with a smile that looked painted on his face. Whitmore owned 3 banks and a newspaper. His tuxedo fit him like it was sewn onto his body. "So wonderful that you could join us tonight." His eyes did the same scan that everyone else's did. Up and down Michael's suit, taking in every wrinkle, every place where the fabric pulled wrong, every sign that this outfit came from a regular store where regular people shopped. "Thank you for inviting me," Michael said. Of course. Of course. Always happy to have our local sports heroes support the children." Whitmore's attention was already drifting to someone more important walking by. "Well, enjoy the evening. Your table is, let me see, table 12. Table 12 was in the back corner, far from the stage where the speeches would happen, far from the important tables where the important people sat. It was the table for people who didn't quite fit but had to be invited anyway. Michael made his way across the room, Past conversations about stock markets and vacation homes and children at expensive colleges. He felt the eyes following him. Not mean eyes. Exactly. Just curious ones. Like people watching an animal at the zoo. That's Michael Jordan. He heard someone say. The basketball player? Yes. But look at that suit. Doesn't he make millions of dollars? You'd think he could afford better clothes. Maybe athletes don't know about fashion. How sad. Table 12 had 8 chairs. 7 were filled with people Michael had never met. They looked up when he approached and their faces showed the same polite surprise he'd been seeing all night. You must be our basketball star, said a woman with silver hair piled high on her head like a wedding cake. I'm Dorothy Hamilton. My husband owns Hamilton Industries. Nice to meet you, Michael said, taking the empty chair. The conversation around the table was like background music in an elevator. Stock prices, property values, which country club had the best golf course. Michael sat quietly, cutting his chicken and listening to people talk about problems he'd never have. During the salad course, Dorothy leaned over with a smile that was supposed to be kind. I just love what you've done with this look, she said, gesturing at his suit. It's so authentic, so real. Like you just stepped out of a regular person's closet. The table erupted in gentle laughter. Not the mean kind of laughter that bullies use. The worst kind. The kind that says, bless your heart, you're trying so hard. It's refreshing, agreed Harold Peterson, who owned a chain of luxury hotels. In a world of fashion and pretense, here's someone who keeps it simple. Exactly, said Peterson's wife. It takes confidence to dress down in a room like this. They thought they were being nice. They thought they were making him feel better. But their words hit harder than any insult could have. Michael nodded and smiled and said thank you. Because that's what you do when people think they're helping you. But inside, something was burning. The same fire he'd felt when Coach Herring told him he wasn't good enough for varsity basketball. The same heat that had driven him to practice until his hands bled and his legs couldn't hold him up. These people thought they knew who he was. A basketball player who got lucky. An athlete who could jump high and shoot a ball but didn't understand their world of real money and real power. They had no idea what was coming. As dessert was served, some fancy cake with gold flakes on top, Michael excused himself from the table. Just need to make a phone call, he said. He walked toward the lobby, past all the beautiful people in their beautiful clothes, past the crystal and gold and marble that was supposed to impress him. But Michael Jordan wasn't impressed anymore. He was ready to change everything. In his pocket, his fingers found the business card he'd been carrying for weeks. The card of a man who understood what it felt like to be underestimated, what it felt like to be laughed at by people who thought they were better than you. Tonight, those people were going to learn something new. They were going to learn what happened when you counted out Michael Jordan. Willington, North Carolina, October. Michael found a quiet corner near the hotel's fancy bar. Rich people in expensive clothes walked past him like he was invisible. He pulled out his phone and stared at the numbers on the business card he'd been carrying for weeks. But before he could dial, his mind traveled back to another time when people had counted him out, back to the moment that started it all. 11 years earlier, 15-year-old Michael Jordan stood in front of the bulletin board at Laney High School in Wilmington, North Carolina. The autumn sun streamed through dirty windows onto a piece of white paper that would change his life forever. Varsity basketball team roster was written at the top in black marker. Michael's eyes moved down the list of names. Adams, Billy, Carter, James, Davis, Robert. His heart pounded as he searched for Jordan, Michael. It should have been right there between Jackson and Kennedy. But it wasn't there. He read the list again. Then again. His name was nowhere to be found. Sorry, Mike. Coach Clifton Herring's voice came from behind him. You're just not ready yet. You need to get bigger, stronger, maybe next year. Michael turned around. Coach Herring was a good man who meant well. He wore the same brown jacket every day and always smelled like coffee and chalk. But Coach, I've been practicing all summer. I know you have. And you're getting better. But look around, son. These other boys are juniors and seniors. They're bigger than you. They've been playing longer. It was true. Michael was only 5 feet 10 inches tall and skinny as a beanpole. His best friend Leroy Smith had made the team. Leroy was 6 feet 2 inches and could dunk the ball. Most of the other players were even taller. Hit the weight room, Coach Herring said, putting a hand on Michael's shoulder. Eat more. Grow a few inches. Try again next year. Michael nodded because that's what you do when adults give you advice. But inside, something was breaking apart and building up at the same time. He walked home slowly that October afternoon. The leaves were turning red and gold, and the air smelled like someone was burning them in their backyard. His house was a small brick building on Gordon Road. Nothing fancy, but his mother Dolores kept it clean and warm. She was in the kitchen when he came through the front door. She was always in the kitchen after school preparing dinner for the family. Today it was fried chicken, green beans, and cornbread. The same meal she made every Tuesday. How was school? She asked without looking up from the stove. Fine. But his voice cracked on the word fine, and Dolores Jordan had raised 5 children. She knew when something was wrong. She turned around and really looked at her son. She saw the hurt in his eyes, but she also saw something else, something that burned bright and angry. What happened? I didn't make the basketball team. The words hung in the air between them like smoke. Dolores stopped stirring the green beans and faced her son completely. What are you gonna do about it? She asked. Not I'm sorry, or that's too bad, or maybe basketball isn't for you. Just what are you gonna do about it? I don't know, Mama. Well, you better figure it out fast. Because in this house, we don't quit when things get hard. We don't feel sorry for ourselves when people tell us no. We work. That night, Michael lay in his narrow bed staring at the ceiling. His younger brother Larry was already asleep in the twin bed across the room. Through the thin walls, he could hear his parents talking downstairs, their voices mixed with the sound of dishes being washed and the TV playing the evening news. Michael made himself a promise in that dark room. He would show them. All of them. The next morning, he was at the school gym at 6 a.m. The doors were locked, so he sat on the concrete steps and waited. When Mr. Jenkins, the janitor, arrived at 6:30, Michael was there with a basketball under his arm. Son, what are you doing here so early? Mr. Jenkins asked, fumbling with his keys. Waiting to practice. School doesn't start for 2 hours. I know. Mr. Jenkins looked at this skinny kid with determined eyes and shook his head. But he unlocked the gym dorm. This became Michael's life. Every morning before school, he was in that gym. Every afternoon after classes ended, he was back. Weekends, holidays, sick days when he probably should have been home in bed. While other kids went to movies or hung out at the Food Lion parking lot, Michael was shooting basketballs until his arms ached. He ran sprints until his lungs burned. He practiced dribbling until his fingers were raw and bleeding. Man, why are you doing this to yourself? His friend Leroy asked one evening in November. Leroy had stopped by the gym after varsity practice and found Michael still shooting free throws in the dark. Doing what? This. All this practicing. There are other things to do besides basketball. You know, Michael stopped dribbling and looked at his friend. Leroy was a good player and a good person. But he didn't understand. No, Michael said quietly. There aren't. Not for me. As the months passed, something amazing happened. Michael started growing. By Christmas, he was 6 feet tall. By Easter, he was 6 feet 2 inches. The daily workouts were making him stronger and faster. But more than his body was changing, his mind was changing too. Every morning when he woke up, he thought about that bulletin board, about the names that were on it, and the name that wasn't, about Coach Herring saying he wasn't ready, about classmates who had laughed and said he was too small to play with the big boys. He used that anger like fuel for a fire. Every shot he missed made him practice harder. Every sprint that hurt his legs made him run faster. Every doubt in his mind made him work longer. Coach Herring started to notice. During JV games, he would see this tall, determined kid making plays that shouldn't have been possible. Shots from angles that were too hard. Steals from players who were bigger. Jumps that seemed to defy gravity. That Jordan boy is different, he told his assistant coach after one game. I think I might have made a mistake. By the end of his sophomore year, Michael wasn't just on the varsity team. He was the best player on it. College scouts started showing up to watch him play. His name appeared in the local newspaper. Kids who had ignored him suddenly wanted to be his friend. But Michael never forgot that October day. He never forgot the feeling of not being good enough, of being overlooked, of people thinking they knew who he was. and what he could do. He carried that feeling everywhere. To the University of North Carolina, where he hit the shot that won the national championship. To the NBA, where he became a superstar. To fancy dinner parties in Chicago, where people in expensive clothes looked at his cheap suit and whispered to each other. That feeling never went away. And Michael Jordan never wanted it to go away. Because it reminded him of something important. It reminded him that when people count you out, when they laugh at you, when they think they know your limits, that's when you're most dangerous. Back in the Palmer House Hilton, Michael shook his head, returning to the present moment. He was 26 years old now, standing in a luxury hotel wearing a suit that cost less than these people spent on lunch. But inside, he was still that 15-year-old boy staring at a bulletin board, feeling the sting of being told he wasn't good enough. The difference was, now he knew what to do with that feeling. He looked down at the business card in his hand. The numbers seemed to glow under the hotel's bright lights. This phone call would change everything. Not just for him, but for every athlete who had ever been underestimated. Every kid who had ever been told they weren't good enough. Michael Jordan was about to prove them all wrong. Again. Palmer House Hilton. November. Michael's fingers trembled slightly as he dialed the numbers. Around him, wealthy people in perfect clothes walked through the hotel lobby like they owned the world. They probably did own pieces of it. The phone rang once, twice. Sonny Vaccaro speaking. Sonny, it's Michael. I'm ready to make the call. There was a pause on the other end. Sonny Vaccaro worked for Nike, the shoe company. He'd been chasing Michael for months, with an idea that sounded crazy to most people. Create a signature basketball shoe line with Michael Jordan as the star. Now, Michael, it's almost 10 o'clock at night. Now, where are you calling from? A fancy dinner party where everyone thinks I don't belong. Sonny laughed, and Michael could hear papers rustling in the background. Those are usually the best places to make history, my friend. Through the glass doors, Michael could see back into the ballroom. Table 12 looked tiny from here. The people sitting there were probably still talking about his cheap suit and laughing their polite laughs. Tell me about the deal again, Michael said. It's simple, but nobody has ever done anything like it before. We create a shoe line called Air Jordan. You get money for every single pair we sell. Plus you get to own part of Nike itself. Michael had heard this before, but it still sounded impossible. Most athletes got paid once to put their name on shoes. A flat fee, maybe $100,000 or $200,000. But Sonny was talking about something completely different. How much money are we talking about? If the shoes sell well, you could make millions every year. Not just once, but every year forever. And the Nike stock options? If the company grows like we think it will, those could be worth tens of millions. Michael did the math in his head. Nike stock was trading at about $8 per share. If Sonny was right about the company growing, those shares could be worth much more someday. And you really think people will buy shoes just because my name is on them? Michael, listen to me carefully. You're not just going to be a basketball player who sells shoes. You're going to be something the world has never seen before. You're going to be a brand. A brand. Like Coca-Cola or McDonald's. Michael had never thought of himself that way. What does that mean exactly? It means kids won't just want to wear your shoes, they'll want to be you. When they put on Air Jordans, they'll feel like they can fly. They'll feel like they can be great at something. Michael watched a waiter walk by carrying champagne glasses that sparkled like diamonds under the hotel lights. There's something else I want to do, Michael said. What's that? What if we didn't stop at shoes? What if we created Air Jordan clothes? Air Jordan everything? The line went quiet. Michael could hear Sonny breathing. Michael, that's not really how this business works. Shoe companies make shoes. Clothing companies make clothes. Maybe it's time the business worked differently. You're talking about building an empire. That takes years. Decades. I've got time. Another pause. Then Sonny's voice came back. More excited now. You know what? You're right. Why should we think small? Why should we let other companies make money off your name when we could do it ourselves? Michael felt something electric running through his body. The same feeling he'd had when he made his first varsity team, when he hit the winning shot in college, when he scored 63 points against the Boston Celtics. So, we're really gonna do this? We're going to do this. But Michael, I need you to understand something. This isn't just about making money. This is about changing how people think about athletes, about sports, about what's possible. Michael looked back toward the ballroom one more time. He could see Dorothy Hamilton at table 12, probably telling another story about her husband's business deals. All those people thought they knew how the world worked. They thought they knew who belonged in their world and who didn't. "Sonny, what if I told you I wanted to do something that would shock everyone in that room?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if we built something so big, so successful that people like them would have to respect it?" "Respect me?" "Michael, are you saying what I think you're saying?" "I'm saying yes to Nike. But I'm also saying we're going to build something nobody has ever seen before. Something that will make all these rich people wish they had bet on the kid in the cheap suit. This could change everything." That's exactly what I wanted to do. But as Michael was about to hang up, Sonny said something that made him pause. "Michael, there's one more thing. We want to make a commercial. Something different. We found this young director named Spike Lee. He has an idea about showing kids that they can achieve anything if they work hard enough." "What's the commercial about?" "It's about a kid who dreams of being like you." The tagline would be something like, "Be like Mike." "We want to show that Air Jordan isn't just about shoes. It's about inspiration." Michael felt goosebumps on his arms. A commercial about inspiring kids to be great. About showing them that it didn't matter where you came from or what people said about you. All that mattered was how hard you were willing to work. "I love it. There's just one problem."
What?
"The Nike executives are nervous about spending this much money on one athlete. They're worried that if you get injured or if your career doesn't work out, they'll lose millions. So what do? We prove them wrong. We make Air Jordan the most successful athletic product in history. We show them that betting on Michael Jordan is the smartest thing they ever did." Michael hung up the phone and straightened his navy blue suit jacket one more time. Same cheap suit, same face. But everything else had changed. He wasn't just Michael Jordan the basketball player anymore. He was Michael Jordan the brand. Michael Jordan the businessman. Michael Jordan the dream seller. As he walked back toward the ballroom, he thought about all the kids who would wear his shoes someday. Kids who felt like they didn't belong. Kids who got cut from teams. Kids who wore cheap clothes and got laughed at by people who thought they were better. Those kids would put on Air Jordans and feel like they could do anything. But first, Michael had to go back to table 12 and finish his dinner. He had to sit with people who thought they knew who he was and what he was worth. They had no idea that they had just witnessed the birth of a billion-dollar empire. And it all started with a phone call from a man in a suit that came from Sears. When Michael reached the ballroom doors, he paused for just a moment. Inside that room were some of the most powerful people in Chicago. People who controlled banks and businesses and real estate empires. Soon, very soon, he was going to be more powerful than all of them. But there was still one surprise waiting for him at table 12. A surprise that would change everything he thought he knew about business, about power, and about who his real allies were in this new world he was entering. The surprise had silver hair and kind eyes, and he'd been waiting all evening to meet Michael Jordan. Palmer House Hilton Ballroom. When Michael walked back into the ballroom, something was different at table 12. Someone new was sitting in his chair. An elderly man with silver hair was chatting with the other guests like he'd been there all night. Everyone was leaning forward, hanging on his every word. Dorothy Hamilton was laughing at something he'd just said. Even Harold Peterson, who usually looked bored at these events, seemed interested. "Excuse me," Michael said politely when he reached the table. "That's my seat." The man turned around slowly. He had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and a smile that seemed to know secrets. When he stood up, Michael noticed he was shorter than expected, maybe 5 feet 6 inches. His black tuxedo fit perfectly, but it looked old-fashioned, like something from another time. "You must be Michael Jordan," the man said, extending his hand. "I'm Harold Chen. I've been waiting all evening to meet you." His handshake was firm but gentle. His voice had a slight accent that Michael couldn't place. Dorothy Hamilton suddenly looked very excited. "Harold, you know Michael? We've never met," Harold said, still looking at Michael with those knowing eyes. "But I've been following his career very closely." Michael was confused. Harold Chen looked like someone's grandfather. His tuxedo was expensive but old. His shoes were polished but worn. He didn't look like someone who would care about basketball. "Please, keep the seat," Michael said. "I can sit somewhere else." "Nonsense. This is your table. Harold moved to an empty chair that someone had brought over. I was just keeping it warm for you. As Michael sat down, Dorothy leaned over with bright eyes. Harold was just telling us about his business. He owns factories all over the world. What kind of factories? Michael asked. Harold's eyes sparkled like he was enjoying a private joke. Oh, a little bit of everything. Textiles mostly. Some electronics. We make things that other companies put their names on. Like what companies? Well, let's see. Harold pretended to think. Nike uses some of our facilities. Adidas. Reebok. Most of the shoe companies, actually. Michael felt his heart skip a beat. This couldn't be an accident. He'd just gotten off the phone with Nike. And now there was a man at his table who made shoes for them. You make athletic shoes? Among other things, we have a big facility in Taiwan that produces about 2 million pairs each year. Another one in South Korea that does even more. Janet Morrison clapped her hands together. Harold, how exciting. You must make a fortune. Harold chuckled. I do all right. But you know, money isn't the most important thing. He looked directly at Michael. Is it Michael? There was something in the way he said Michael's name. Like they were old friends sharing a secret. What do you mean? Michael asked. I mean that the most successful people I know aren't the ones who were born rich. They're not the ones who inherited their money or married into it. Harold's voice was quiet, but everyone at the table was listening. They're the ones who had to earn it. The ones who got laughed at along the way. The table fell silent. Dorothy stopped playing with her jewelry. Harold Peterson put down his wine glass. Everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. Tell me, Michael, Harold continued, what do people laugh at you for? Michael looked around the table. These same people had been whispering about his suit all night. They'd made their polite jokes about his authentic look. Now they were waiting to hear what he would say. They laugh at me because they think I don't belong in places like this. Michael said slowly, they think I'm just a basketball player who got lucky. And what do you think? Michael felt that familiar fire building inside him. The same feeling he'd had when he didn't make varsity. When people said he was too small. When coaches said he wasn't ready. I think they're about to find out how wrong they are. Harold smiled. It was the same smile Coach Dean Smith had given him after winning the national championship. The smile that said, now you're learning. You know, Michael, I started my first business with $200 in a sewing machine. This was 1952, right after I came to America from Taiwan. I was 25 years old and couldn't speak much English. The table was completely quiet now. Even the noise from other tables seemed to fade away. I wore the same suit every day for 2 years, because it was the only one I owned. People laughed at me too. They said I was just another immigrant who didn't understand how business worked in America. Harold reached for his water glass and took a small sip. They said I should stick to what I knew, which to be honest wasn't very much at the time. Dorothy leaned forward. But you proved them wrong. I did more than that. I learned something about American consumers that the big companies didn't understand. What was that? Michael asked. Harold's eyes locked onto Michael's. Americans don't just buy products. They buy dreams. They buy the idea of becoming something better than they are right now. Harold stood up and straightened his old-fashioned tuxedo jacket. Michael, I've been in the shoe business for 37 years. I know every player, every deal, every factory from here to Hong Kong. And I can tell you something with complete certainty. What's that? The next big thing in athletic shoes isn't going to come from the companies everyone expects. It's not going to come from the executives in their fancy offices, or the marketing people with their expensive suits. Harold reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a simple business card. He handed it to Michael. It's going to come from someone who thinks differently. Someone who's been underestimated. Someone who's hungry. Michael looked at the business card. It was simple and elegant. Chen Manufacturing Enterprises. It read, below that, Harold Chen, Chairman and CEO. I have a feeling we'll be talking again very soon, Harold said. Enjoy the rest of your evening. He shook Michael's hand one more time and walked away, leaving Michael holding the business card and wondering if any of this was real. Dorothy stared after Harold with wide eyes. Michael, do you know who that was? Harold Chen, apparently. Harold Chen controls about 60% of athletic shoe manufacturing in Asia. His companies are worth hundreds of millions of dollars, maybe billions. Michael looked down at the business card again. In small print at the bottom it said, "Making dreams come true since." As the evening wound down and people started leaving, Michael realized something important. Harold Chen's appearance wasn't an accident. Someone had planned this meeting. But who? And why? The answer to that question would change everything Michael thought he knew about the deal he'd just made with Nike. Palmer House Hilton parking garage. Michael was walking toward his red BMW in the hotel parking garage when he heard footsteps behind him. The clicking sound of dress shoes on concrete echoed off the cement walls. He turned around to see Harold Chen approaching. But something was different now. The kindly grandfather act was gone. Harold's posture was straighter. His eyes were sharper. He moved like a man who was used to being in charge. "We need to talk," Harold said. "About what?" "About the phone call you made an hour ago." Michael's blood felt like ice water. "How do you know about that?" "Because Sonny Vaccaro called me 30 minutes after he talked to you. He wanted to make sure my factories could handle the production if your shoe line becomes as big as Nike thinks it will." Harold gestured toward Michael's car. "Get in. Let's go for a drive." They drove through downtown Chicago in complete silence. Harold gave quiet directions. Left on Michigan Avenue, right on Lakeshore Drive. The city lights reflected off Lake Michigan like fallen stars on black water. They ended up at North Avenue Beach, sitting in the car looking out at the lake. The November air was cold and smelled like snow was coming. "You want to know what's really happening here, Michael?" "I'm listening." Nike isn't just creating a shoe line. They're running an experiment. They want to see if they can turn an athlete into something bigger than sports. If it works with you, they'll try it with other athletes. If it fails, they'll go back to the old way of doing business. Harold rolled down his window. Cold air rushed into the car. But here's what Nike doesn't understand. They think this is about marketing and advertising and putting your face on commercials. They think they can control what happens. Can't they? Not anymore. Because what you're really selling isn't shoes, Michael. You're selling hope. You're selling the idea that anyone can be great if they work hard enough. Michael thought about his phone call with Sonny. About becoming a brand. About kids wearing Air Jordans and feeling like they could fly. "What's your point?" "My point is that Nike is thinking too small. They want to make Air Jordan shoes and maybe some shirts. They want to put your picture in magazines and sell products." Harold turned to face Michael directly. "But what if you owned everything? What if instead of being Nike's partner, you became their biggest competitor?" "That's impossible. Nike has been around for years. They have stores, factories, millions of customers. I'm just one person. So was Phil Knight when he started Nike in 1964. So was I when I started my first company with $200. The difference isn't money or connections, Michael. It's vision." Harold reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick folder. "I've been thinking about this for months. Ever since I heard Nike was interested in you. And I have an idea." Michael opened the folder. Inside were pages of numbers, charts, and business plans. It looked like something from a college textbook. "What is this?" "It's a plan. For your own shoe company." Michael stared at the papers. According to Harold's math, a Michael Jordan shoe company could be worth over $1 billion someday. "This is crazy." "Is it?" "Let me ask you something, Michael. When you were 15 and didn't make your high school basketball team, did anyone think you'd become one of the best players in the world?" "No." "When you were in college, did anyone think some kid from North Carolina would become the most famous athlete on the planet?" "No." "Then why is it so hard to believe that you could build your own business empire?" Michael looked out at Lake Michigan. The water was dark except where the moon touched it, creating a path of silver light that seemed to stretch on forever. "Even if this was possible, I don't know anything about running a business. Neither did Ray Kroc when he started McDonald's. Neither did Walt Disney when he started his company. They learned by doing, and they found smart people to help them." Harold pointed to his folder. "I've found 12 top executives from major shoe companies who would work with us if we made them the right offer. I know suppliers, distributors, even store owners who would sell our products. Why are you telling me this? What do you get out of it?" Harold smiled for the first time since they'd gotten in the car. "What do I get? I get to be part of something nobody has ever done before. I get to help create the first athlete-owned global brand. And yes, I get to make a lot of money doing it." He paused and looked out at the lake. "But mostly I get to prove something to myself. That a 72-year-old man who people laughed at for 40 years can still change the world. Michael felt something stirring inside him. The same feeling he'd had when Coach Herring said he wasn't ready for varsity. When people said he couldn't win a championship. When the wealthy people at dinner looked at his suit and whispered to each other, "What would this look like?" We start with Nike. We take their deal and learn everything we can. How to make shoes, how to sell them, how to build a brand. We use their money and their factories to get an education. Harold's voice was getting more excited. But while we're learning, we're also planning. We're creating our own designs, our own business plan, our own team of people. And when the time is right, maybe 5 years from now, maybe 10, we launch Jordan Brand as its own company and compete with Nike and destroy Nike. Or at least show them what a real athlete brand looks like. Michael closed the folder and handed it back to Harold. "I can't do this." "Why not?" "Because I already gave my word to Sonny. I'm taking the Nike deal." Harold nodded like he'd expected this answer. "I know. And you should take it. Like I said, we start with Nike. We learn from Nike. We let Nike teach us everything they know." He started the car. "But that doesn't mean we have to stay with Nike forever. Keep the folder, Michael. Think about what I've said. In the meantime, make your Nike shoes the most successful product in sports history." Harold smiled as he put the car in drive. "Because when you're ready to make your next move, I want Nike to know exactly what they're losing." As they drove back through the city, Michael held the folder in his lap and thought about everything Harold had said. Own his own company. Compete with Nike. Build a billion-dollar empire. It sounded impossible. But then again, so had making his high school basketball team. So had winning a national championship in college. So had becoming one of the best players in the NBA. Maybe impossible was just another word for hasn't happened yet. When Harold dropped him off at the hotel, Michael sat in his car for a long time, staring at the folder. Inside were plans for something that had never been done before. An athlete who didn't just endorse products but owned them, controlled them, built them into something bigger than anyone imagined. Harold Chen had just shown him a path to becoming more than a basketball player, more than a spokesperson, more than a brand. Harold had shown him how to become an empire. But first, Michael had to prove he could succeed with Nike. He had to show the world that Air Jordan wasn't just another shoe. It was the beginning of a revolution. What neither Michael nor Harold knew was that their conversation in the parking garage had been watched. And the person watching would soon make a phone call that could destroy everything they were planning. Nike headquarters, Beaverton, Oregon. Phil Knight sat in his corner office at Nike headquarters, staring at the Oregon mountains through floor-to-ceiling windows. At 51 years old, he had built Nike from a small company selling shoes out of his car into a billion-dollar empire. He was used to winning. He was not used to being threatened. The phone on his desk rang at exactly 7:30.
Mr. Knight?
This is Detective Marcus Webb from the Chicago Police Department. We spoke yesterday about the surveillance you requested. Phil Knight rubbed his temples. What did you find? Your basketball player met with Harold Chen last night. They talked for over an hour in a parking garage by Lake Michigan. My partner got photos and recorded most of their conversation. Knight's stomach dropped. Harold Chen was one of the most powerful manufacturers in Asia. His factories made shoes for Nike, Adidas, Reebok, and dozens of other companies. If Harold was talking to Michael Jordan about business, it could only mean one thing. What did they discuss? Chen showed Jordan a business plan, something about starting their own shoe company. They talked about using Nike to learn the business, then breaking away to become competitors. Knight felt like someone had punched him in the chest. Michael Jordan was supposed to be Nike's golden goose. The Air Jordan line could make Nike hundreds of millions of dollars. But if Michael started his own company with Harold Chen's help, it could destroy everything. Are you sure about this? Positive. I have it all on tape if you want to hear it. Knight hung up the phone and immediately called his assistant. Get me Sonny Vaccaro. Now. And cancel all my meetings today. 20 minutes later, Sonny Vaccaro walked into Knight's office looking confused. Sonny was Nike's basketball marketing genius. He had convinced Knight to take a chance on Michael Jordan when other executives thought it was too risky. Phil, what's going on? Your assistant said it was urgent. Sit down, Sonny. We have a problem. Knight told him everything. About hiring the detective to watch Michael. About the meeting with Harold Chen. About the plan to eventually compete with Nike. Sonny's face went pale. You had Michael followed? Of course I did. He's about to become our biggest investment. I need to know if he's loyal.
Phil, this is crazy. Michael just agreed to our deal last night. Why would he already be planning to leave us?
Knight walked to his window and looked out at the Nike campus. Hundreds of employees were arriving for work, ready to build the company's future. A future that might not exist if Michael Jordan betrayed them. Because athletes are greedy, Sonny. They take our money, use our resources, then leave us for someone who offers them more. Michael's not like that. Every athlete is like that when enough money is involved. Knight turned back to face Sonny. Here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna change the terms of Michael's contract. What do you mean? I mean, we're gonna add a clause that prevents him from starting his own shoe company for 20 years. If he tries to compete with us, he'll owe us $50 million in damages. Sonny stood up quickly. Phil, you can't do that. We already shook hands on the deal. Michael will walk away. Let him walk. There are other basketball players. Not like Michael Jordan. Knight sat down behind his massive desk. The desk was made from Oregon oak and had cost more than most PP made in a year. It was designed to intimidate people. Sonny, I built this company from nothing. I started with $1,000 and a crazy idea about selling Japanese running shoes in America. I've survived recessions, lawsuits, and competitors who wanted to destroy us. He leaned forward. I'm not gonna let some basketball player ruin everything I've built. Even if that player is Michael Jordan. Sonny paced around the office like a caged animal. Phil, think about this carefully. If we try to trap Michael with a bad contract, he might sign with Adidas instead. Or Converse. We'll lose him completely. Better to lose him now than have him destroy us later. What if the detective was wrong? What if Michael was just being polite to an old man who wanted to talk business? Knight picked up a folder from his desk and threw it at Sonny. Read this. It's the transcript of their conversation. Michael Jordan is already planning to betray us. Sonny caught the folder and opened it. As he read, his face got more and more worried. Oh no. What? Phil, this is worse than you think. Harold Chen doesn't just own factories. He owns the factories that make our shoes. If he decides to help Michael start a competing company, he could cut off our supply chain. Knight felt like the room was spinning. What are you saying? I'm saying that Harold Chen could destroy Nike tomorrow if he wanted to. He makes 60% of all athletic shoes sold in America. If he stops making our products and starts making Michael Jordan's products instead, Knight finished the thought. We're finished. The two men sat in silence for several minutes, each thinking about what this meant. Nike had spent years building relationships with retailers, creating marketing campaigns and establishing their brand, but all of that depended on being able to make shoes. Without Harold Chen's factories, they would have nothing to sell. There's something else, Sonny said quietly. What? I think Harold Chen planned this whole thing. Michael meeting him at that dinner wasn't an accident. Harold probably bought a ticket to the charity event just to get close to Michael. Why would he do that? Because Harold Chen has been making shoes for other companies his whole life. Maybe he's tired of making other people rich. Maybe he wants to build his own brand. Knight stood up and walked to a wall, covered with photos of Nike's greatest moments. Pictures of famous athletes wearing Nike shoes. Championships won in Nike uniforms. Millions of customers around the world who trusted the Nike brand. So what do? We fight back, Knight said. We make Michael an offer he can't refuse. More money, more control, more of everything. We make him so happy that he never wants to leave. And if that doesn't work, then we destroy him before he can destroy us. Sonny looked shocked. Phil, you can't be serious. I'm completely serious. I didn't build Nike to watch it get destroyed by some ungrateful athlete and his scheming business partner. Knight walked back to his desk and picked up his phone. Who are you calling? Our lawyers. I want them to find every legal way to prevent Michael Jordan from competing with us. Patents, trademarks, non-compete agreements. Whatever it takes. Phil, please think about this. If we start a war with Michael Jordan, we might win the battle, but lose everything else. Other athletes will see how we treated him. They'll be afraid to work with us. Knight paused with the phone in his hand. Maybe you're right, Sonny. Maybe we should take a different approach. What do you mean? I mean, maybe we should make Harold Chen an offer too. Instead of fighting him, we make him our partner. We give him ownership in Nike. We make him so rich that he never wants to help Michael compete with us. Sonny nodded slowly. That could work. Harold Chen is a businessman first. If we make him more money as our partner than he could make as our competitor. Exactly. Knight sat back down, feeling better for the first time since the phone call. Get me Harold Chen's phone number. It's time to have a conversation. But what Phil Knight didn't know was that Harold Chen had been expecting his call. In fact, Harold had been counting on everything that had happened. Michael's meeting with Harold, the detective following them, even Phil Knight's angry reaction had been part of Harold's plan from the beginning. Harold Chen was about to teach Nike's founder something important. Never underestimate a man who has been underestimated his whole life. The real game was just beginning. Harold Chen's office, Chicago. Harold Chen sat behind his simple wooden desk, sipping green tea from a plain white cup. His office looked nothing like Phil Knight's fancy headquarters. No expensive furniture. No awards on the walls. Just a small room above a Chinese restaurant in Chicago's Chinatown. But the 3 phones on his desk were ringing non-stop. His assistant, a young woman named Lisa Park, knocked on the door. Mr. Chen, Phil Knight from Nike is on line 1. He says it's urgent. Harold smiled and picked up the phone. Phil, what a surprise. How are you this beautiful morning? Cut the act, Harold. We need to talk. Of course we do. I've been expecting your call. There was silence on the other end. Harold could practically hear Phil Knight's brain working, trying to figure out what that meant. You've been expecting my call? Phil, I've been in business for 37 years. Do you really think I would meet with Michael Jordan in a public parking garage without knowing someone might be watching? More silence. What do you want, Harold? The same thing you want. To make a lot of money. But unlike you, I'm not afraid of a little competition. Harold stood up and walked to his small window. Below, he could see people walking through Chinatown, buying groceries, and heading to work. Normal people living normal lives. People who had no idea they were witnessing the birth of something that would change sports forever. Here's what's gonna happen, Phil. You're gonna make your deal with Michael Jordan exactly as you planned. Same money, same terms, same everything. And why would I do that? Because if you don't, I'll help Michael start his own company tomorrow. And I'll make sure every shoe factory in Asia refuses to work with Nike. Phil Knight's voice got very quiet. When powerful men spoke quietly, it usually meant they were getting ready to destroy someone. Are you threatening me, Harold? I'm educating you. There's a difference. Harold sat back down and opened a folder on his desk. Inside were financial reports, factory schedules, and shipping manifests. The entire global athletic shoe business laid out in numbers and charts. Phil, do you know how many pairs of Nike shoes my factories made last year? No. 47 million pairs. That's about 60% of everything Nike sold worldwide. Harold flipped through the papers like he was reading a grocery list. Adidas, 32 million pairs. Reebok, 21 million. New Balance, 15 million. What's your point? My point is that I don't just make shoes for you, Phil. I make shoes for everyone. And if one of my customers decides to treat their athletes badly, I might decide to work with someone else instead. Harold could hear Phil Knight breathing heavily on the other end of the line. But here's the thing, Phil. I don't want to destroy Nike. That would be bad for business. What I want is to create something new. Something better. Better how? Harold picked up a photograph from his desk. It showed a young Michael Jordan in his Bulls uniform, flying through the air toward the basketball hoop. It looked like he was actually flying. Better for athletes. Better for consumers. Better for everyone except the people who think they can control everything. Harold, just tell me what you want. I want Michael Jordan to succeed beyond everyone's wildest dreams. I want Air Jordan to become the most successful athletic product in history. And I want Nike to make hundreds of millions of dollars from it. And then, when Michael is ready, I want to help him build something even bigger. Something that belongs to him, not to some corporation that thinks it owns him. Harold heard Phil Knight sigh deeply. How long do we have? 5 years, maybe 7. Long enough for Michael to learn the business, long enough for you to make your money back and then some. And after that, Phil, you'll have a choice. You can fight us and lose everything. Or you can work with us and become even richer than you are now. Harold hung up the phone and immediately dialed another number. Michael? It's Harold. How did you sleep? Not very well. I keep thinking about everything we talked about last night.
Good, that means you're taking it seriously.
Michael's voice sounded tired but excited. Harold, I have a question. How did you know I was going to be at that dinner party? Harold laughed. I didn't know. I bought a ticket and hoped you would show up. It was a lie. Harold had known Michael would be there because he had been planning this meeting for months. He had studied Michael's schedule, learned about his charity work, and even made sure Michael would be seated at table 12, where Harold could easily approach him. Michael, can you meet me for lunch today?
There are some people I want you to meet.
What kind of people? The kind of people who are going to help us change the world. 2 hours later, Michael walked into a small restaurant in Chinatown. He expected to find Harold waiting for him at a table for two. Instead, he found Harold sitting with 5 other people, all dressed in expensive business suits. Michael, please sit down, Harold said. I want you to meet your future business partners. The woman sitting next to Harold stood up first. She was about 40 years old with short black hair and intelligent eyes. Michael, I'm Susan Martinez. I used to run marketing for Adidas. I quit last week. The man across from her extended his hand. Robert Kim. I was head of design for Reebok until yesterday. One by one, they introduced themselves. Former executives from every major shoe company in America. All of them had quit their jobs in the past month. Harold, what's going on? Michael asked. What's going on is that I've been recruiting the best people in the athletic shoe business for 6 months. People who are tired of working for companies that don't appreciate athletes. People who want to build something revolutionary. Susan Martinez opened a briefcase and pulled out a stack of designs. Shoe sketches like nothing Michael had ever seen. Modern, sleek, and somehow futuristic. These are preliminary designs for Air Jordan 1, she said. But not Nike's version. Our version. The version we'll release someday under Jordan brand. Michael stared at the drawings. The shoes looked incredible. Better than anything Nike or Adidas had ever made. How long have you been planning this? Since I first heard your name 2 years ago, Harold said. I knew that someday an athlete would come along who was smart enough and hungry enough to build their own empire. I just had to wait for the right person. Robert Kim leaned forward. Michael, we're not just talking about shoes, we're talking about creating a lifestyle brand. Clothing, accessories, maybe even our own retail stores, like McDonald's, but for sports, added Susan Martinez. Harold poured tea for everyone at the table. Michael, what we're offering you is something no athlete has ever had before. Complete ownership of your own global brand. Not partnership, ownership. But what about Nike? Nike is step 1. We learn from them. We use their money and their resources to understand the business. But we never forget that the real goal is independence. Harold looked around the table at his team of former executives. Everyone in this room has spent years making other people rich. Now we're going to make ourselves rich. And we're going to do it by treating athletes like partners instead of employees. Michael felt the same excitement he'd felt before big games. The feeling that something amazing was about to happen. When do we start? We already have, Harold said with a smile. The moment you walked into this restaurant, you became the owner of a company that doesn't exist yet but will someday be worth billions. As Michael looked around the table at his new business partners, he realized that Harold Chen had done something incredible. He had taken Michael's anger at being underestimated and turned it into the foundation of a business empire. But what none of them knew was that Phil Knight wasn't giving up. At that very moment, Nike's lawyers were preparing a contract that would trap Michael Jordan forever. Nike Legal Department, Beaverton, Oregon. Margaret Stevens had been Nike's head lawyer for 12 years. She had written contracts that protected Nike from lawsuits, deals that saved the company millions of dollars, and agreements that kept their biggest competitors from stealing their secrets. But she had never been asked to write a contract designed to trap someone. I don't understand, Phil, she said, looking across the conference table at Phil Knight. This contract is completely different from what we discussed with Michael Jordan last night. Knight paced around the room like a caged animal. His usually perfect hair was messy, and his expensive suit looked wrinkled. The situation has changed, Margaret. We've learned that Michael is planning to betray us. How do you know that? Because I had him followed. He met with Harold Chen last night. They're planning to start their own shoe company and compete with us. Margaret Stevens looked down at the new contract. It was 37 pages long, filled with legal language that would be hard for most people to understand. Hidden in all those words were clauses that would give Nike complete control over Michael Jordan for the next 20 years. Phil, this contract is extreme. If Michael signs this, he won't be able to start his own business until 2009. He'll owe us $50 million if he even talks to our competitors. Good. That's exactly what I want. Margaret's assistant, a young man named David Chen, no relation to Harold, raised his hand nervously. Mr. Knight, sir? I think there might be a problem with this approach. Knight stopped pacing and stared at David. What kind of problem? Well, if we try to trap Michael Jordan with an unfair contract, he might just refuse to sign it. Then we lose him completely. There are other basketball players, Dave, but not like Michael Jordan. The marketing department says he could be the most valuable athlete endorser in history. Margaret nodded in agreement. David's right, Phil. Michael Jordan is special. If we lose him to Adidas or Converse, we'll regret it forever. Knight slammed his hand on the conference table. And if we let him build his own company, he'll destroy us. Harold Chen controls 60% of athletic shoe manufacturing. If he decides to help Michael instead of us, we're finished. The room fell silent. Everyone could see that Phil Knight was scared, and scared, powerful people made dangerous decisions. There's another option, Margaret said quietly. What? We make the contract so attractive that Michael would be crazy to refuse it. More money, more control, more benefits. We make him so happy that he never wants to leave. Knight shook his head. That's exactly what Harold Chen is counting on. He wants us to make Michael rich and famous using our money and resources. Then, when Michael is ready, Harold will help him start his own company as our competitor. Margaret looked at the contract again. It really was a trap. Anyone who signed it would be giving up their freedom for 20 years. Phil, I need to ask you something as your lawyer and your friend. Are you sure you want to do this? What do you mean? I mean that if this contract ever becomes public, it will destroy Nike's reputation. Athletes around the world will see how we treated Michael Jordan. They'll be afraid to work with us. Knight sat down heavily in his chair. For the first time all day, he looked tired instead of angry. Margaret, I built this company from nothing. I started selling shoes out of the back of my car in 1964. I've worked 25 years to get where we are today. He gestured toward the window, where they could see the Nike campus stretching out like a small city. I'm not going to let some basketball player and his scheming business partner destroy everything I've built. Margaret understood Phil Knight's fear. But she also understood something else. She understood that fear could make my people do stupid things. What if we try a different approach, she suggested. Like what? Like being completely honest with Michael. We tell him we know about his meeting with Harold Chen. We explain our concerns. We ask him to promise that he won't compete with us for a reasonable period of time. Knight laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. You think Michael Jordan will just give up his dreams of building an empire because we ask him nicely? I think Michael Jordan is a decent person who honors his commitments. If we treat him fairly, he'll treat us fairly. David Chen cleared his throat again. Actually, Mr. Knight, I have an idea that might work. What is it? What if we give Michael Jordan exactly what he wants? What if we help him build his own empire? But as part of Nike, Knight looked confused. What do you mean? I mean, we create a separate division of Nike, called Jordan Brand. Michael gets complete creative control over his products. He gets a bigger percentage of profits. He gets to hire his own team of people. Margaret's eyes lit up. That's brilliant, David. Michael gets to build his own brand, but it's still connected to Nike. We keep him happy, and we keep him loyal. Knight thought about this for several minutes. It was risky. Giving Michael Jordan that much control could set a precedent that other athletes would demand. But it was less risky than losing him completely. What about Harold Chen? Knight asked. We make Harold Chen our partner too, David suggested. We give him a bigger role in Nike's manufacturing. Maybe we even give him some ownership in the company. You want me to reward the man who's trying to destroy us? I want you to turn your enemy into your ally, David said. It's better than fighting a war you might not win. Knight stood up and walked to the window again. Outside, Nike employees were walking between buildings, working on products that would be sold around the world. All of it could disappear if he made the wrong choice. How long do we have before Michael expects to sign the contract? He asked. Sonny Vaccaro scheduled a meeting for tomorrow morning, Margaret said. Michael thinks he's just coming in to sign the deal we discussed. And what happens if he sees this new contract and refuses to sign it? Then we probably lose him forever. Knight was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, calmer. Margaret, throw away that contract. All of it. Sir? David's right. We're going to give Michael Jordan exactly what he wants. We're going to help him build an empire. But we're going to make sure that empire is connected to Nike forever. Margaret looked relieved. So we're going with the partnership approach? We're going with the partnership approach. But I want you to add one thing to the contract. What's that? I want Michael Jordan to promise that if he ever decides to leave Nike, he'll give us 6 months' notice, and he'll help us find and train his replacement. That's reasonable. Knight smiled for the first time all day. You know what? Maybe Harold Chen did us a favor. Maybe he showed us that the old way of doing business doesn't work anymore. What do you mean? I mean that instead of trying to control our athletes, maybe we should try to empower them. Instead of making them employees, maybe we should make them partners. As the lawyers began drafting a new contract, Phil Knight felt something he hadn't felt in years. Excitement about the future instead of fear of it. But what none of them knew was that Harold Chen had anticipated this exact reaction. He had counted on Nike trying to trap Michael, then changing their approach when they realized it wouldn't work. Because Harold Chen's real plan was much bigger than anyone imagined. He wasn't just trying to help Michael Jordan build a shoe company. He was trying to change the entire relationship between athletes and corporations forever. Nike headquarters, contract signing day. Michael Jordan walked through the glass doors of Nike headquarters wearing his best suit. It was still the same navy blue suit from Sears. But today it felt different. Today it felt like armor. Sonny Vaccaro met him in the lobby with a huge smile. Michael, ready to make history? I think so. They rode the elevator to the executive floor in silence. Michael's mind was racing. In just a few minutes, he would sign the contract that would change his life forever. But he kept thinking about his conversation with Harold Chen yesterday. Remember, Harold had told him over breakfast, this is just the beginning. Sign the Nike deal, learn everything you can, but never forget what we're really building. The elevator doors opened to reveal a conference room filled with Nike executives. Phil Knight stood at the head of a long wooden table, looking more relaxed than Michael had expected. Michael, welcome to Nike, Knight said, shaking his hand. I think you're gonna like what we've prepared for you. Michael sat down at the table. In front of him was a thick stack of papers, the contract that would make him Nike's newest partner. But something was wrong. The contract was much thicker than Sonny had described. Instead of 10 pages, it looked like 50 pages. Michael flipped through the first few sections, trying to understand what he was reading. Mr. Knight, this contract looks different from what Sonny and I discussed. Phil Knight's smile flickered for just a moment. We made some improvements, Michael. Some additions that we think you'll find very exciting. Margaret Stevens, Nike's lawyer, leaned forward. Michael, would you like me to explain the key changes?
Please.
Well, first, we've increased your base salary by 50%. Instead of $500, Michael nodded. That was good news. Second, we've increased your percentage of Air Jordan sales from 5% to 12%. That could mean millions of extra dollars if the shoes sell well. That was even better news. Third, and this is the big one, we're creating a separate division within Nike called Jordan Brand. You'll have complete creative control over your products. You can hire your own design team, your own marketing people, your own everything. Michael felt his heart racing. This was exactly what Harold Chen had talked about. Creative control. His own team. His own brand within Nike. That sounds amazing, Michael said. What's the catch? The room got very quiet. Phil Knight cleared his throat. There's no catch, Michael. But there is one small addition to protect both of us. Margaret Stevens opened the contract to page 37. Michael, we've added a clause that says, if you ever decide to leave Nike, you have to give us 6 months' notice, and you have to help us find and train your replacement. Michael read the clause carefully. Seemed reasonable. Was that all? That's all, Knight said quickly. Everything else is exactly what we discussed. Michael picked up the pen to sign the contract, but something made him pause. Harold Chen had taught him to always read the fine print. Can I have a few minutes to read through this completely? Some of the Nike executives looked uncomfortable, but Phil Knight nodded. Of course. Take all the time you need. Michael spent the next 20 minutes reading every page of the contract. Most of it was legal language that was hard to understand, but the basic terms were clear. Nike would pay him more money than he had ever imagined. He would get creative control over his products. He would build his own brand within their company. It was everything he had dreamed of and more. But as he read, Michael noticed something strange. The contract kept referring to Nike's Air Jordan products and Nike's Jordan brand division. Even though he would have creative control, Nike would still own everything. Mr. Knight, I have a question about ownership. What kind of question? The contract says I have creative control over Jordan brand, but Nike still owns it. What happens if someday I want to buy Jordan brand from Nike and make it independent? The room fell silent again. This time the silence lasted much longer. Phil Knight looked at Margaret Stevens. Margaret looked at Sonny Vaccaro. Sonny looked at his hands. Finally, Knight spoke. Michael, that's not really something we've considered. Jordan brand would be part of Nike. That's the whole point of the partnership. But what if it grows really big? What if someday Jordan brand is worth hundreds of millions of dollars? Shouldn't I have the option to own it myself? Margaret Stevens leaned forward. Michael, that's a very complicated question. Maybe we could add a clause that says we'll discuss that possibility in the future. When in the future? Maybe in 10 years or 15? Michael set down his pen. He thought about Harold Chen and their team of former executives who had quit their jobs to build something revolutionary. He thought about the dinner party where people had laughed at his suit because they thought he didn't belong in their world of real money and real power. I'd like to make a counter-proposal, Michael said. Phil Knight's face went pale. What kind of counter-proposal? I want to add a clause that says after 5 years I have the right to buy Jordan brand from Nike for fair market value. If we can't agree on a price, we'll hire independent experts to decide. The Nike executives looked at each other like Michael had just asked them to give him the entire company. Michael, Knight said carefully, that's not how these partnerships usually work. Maybe it's time they work differently. Michael stood up from the table. Mr. Knight, you're offering me a chance to build something amazing, but you're asking me to build it for you, not for myself. What do you mean? I mean that if Jordan brand becomes worth $1 billion someday, Nike keeps all of it and I get a salary and some percentages. That's not a partnership. That's employment. Sonny Vaccaro looked panicked. Michael, you're getting an incredible deal here. More money than any athlete has ever made from endorsements. I know, Sonny, and I appreciate it. But I also know that if I succeed, Nike will make 10 times more money from my success than I will. Michael picked up his copy of the contract. I'm going to take this home and think about it. If you decide you want a real partner instead of a very well-paid employee, call me. He walked toward the door, then stopped and turned around. Ow. And Mr. Knight? You might want to ask yourself something. What's more valuable to Nike? Owning 100% of nothing, or owning 50% of something that could change the world? Michael left the Nike headquarters and drove straight to Harold Chen's office in Chinatown. Harold was waiting for him with a cup of green tea and a knowing smile. How did it go? Harold asked. They offered me everything we talked about except the one thing that matters most, which is the right to eventually own what I build. Harold nodded like this was exactly what he had expected. And what did you tell them? I told them I'd think about it. Good. Now comes the hard part. What's that? We wait. We let Nike think about what life would be like without Michael Jordan. We let them imagine watching you sign with Adidas or Converse instead. Harold walked to his window and looked out at the busy street below. Michael, what you just did in that room was the most important thing you'll ever do in business. You showed them that you're not just an athlete who's grateful for whatever they offer you. You showed them that you're a businessman who knows his own value. What if they say no? What if they decide they don't want a real partnership? Harold smiled. Then we'll build our own company and compete with them. But I don't think that's going to happen. Why not? Because Phil Knight is too smart to let the most marketable athlete in the world slip away over a contract clause. He's going to call you back, and when he does, he's going to agree to your terms. Harold was right. The phone rang at 4:47 that afternoon. It was Phil Knight, and he was ready to make a deal that would change the sports business forever. Harold Chen's office. The phone's ring cut through the quiet afternoon air like a bell announcing history in the making. Michael looked at Harold, who nodded and pointed to the phone. This was the moment they had been waiting for. Michael Jordan speaking. "Michael, it's Phil Knight. We need to talk." Michael could hear something different in Knight's voice. The commanding tone was gone. Now he sounded like a man who had realized he was about to lose something very valuable. "I'm listening. You were right this morning. What we offered you wasn't a true partnership. It was a very generous employment contract." Harold Chen smiled and gave Michael a thumbs up. "I appreciate you saying that, Mr. Knight. Michael, I want to make you a new offer. An offer that's never been made to any athlete in history." Michael grabbed a pen and piece of paper. Whatever Knight was about to say would be important. "We accept your proposal about the 5-year buyout option. After 5 years, you can purchase Jordan Brand from Nike for fair market value determined by independent experts." Michael wrote down 5-year buyout. Fair market value. "But I want to add something to that," Knight continued. "If Jordan Brand becomes profitable within 3 years, we'll give you the option to buy it after 3 years instead of 5. Harold's eyes widened. This was even better than they had hoped for.
What's the catch?
Michael asked. "No catch. But I want something in return." "What?" "I want you to help us create a new model for athlete partnerships. Not just for you, but for other athletes too. I want Nike to be the company that changes how sports business works." Michael looked at Harold, who was nodding excitedly. "What do you mean exactly?" "I mean that if our partnership with you succeeds, we'll offer similar deals to other athletes. True partnerships instead of just endorsement contracts. We'll help them build their own brands within Nike." Michael felt his heart racing. This wasn't just about him anymore. This was about changing the entire sports industry. "Mr. Knight, are you saying what I think you're saying?" "I'm saying that Michael Jordan is going to be the first athlete in history to truly own his own brand. And if it works, you won't be the last." Michael looked around Harold's small office. It was hard to believe that this tiny room above a Chinese restaurant was where the sports business was being revolutionized. "There's one more thing," Knight said. "We want Harold Chen to be our manufacturing partner for Jordan Brand. Exclusive manufacturing rights for all Jordan Brand products." Harold's smile got even bigger. This meant his factories would make every Air Jordan shoe, every piece of Jordan Brand clothing. Everything. "That sounds good," Michael said. "But Harold and I need to discuss the details." "Of course. How about we all meet tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. We'll finalize the contract then. We'll be there." After Michael hung up, Harold poured 2 cups of green tea. And they sat in comfortable silence for several minutes. "Harold, did we just change the world?" "We just started to change the world. The real work begins now." Harold walked to his filing cabinet and pulled out a thick folder. Inside were dozens of athlete names, each with detailed information about their marketability, their current contracts, and their potential for building independent brands. "Michael, look at this list. Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, Wayne Gretzky, Joe Montana. All of them could have their own brands within their respective sports companies." Michael flipped through the pages. There were basketball players, football players, baseball players, even tennis players and golfers. "You've been planning this for all of them?" "I've been planning this for the future of sports. Athletes should own their success, not just benefit from it." Harold pointed to a chart on his wall that showed athlete endorsement money from 19... "Look at these numbers, Michael. In 1980, the top athlete endorser made $2 million per year. By 1989, it was $8 million. The money is growing fast. But the athletes still don't own anything. What do you think will happen when other athletes see our deal? I think we're going to start a revolution. Athletes around the world are going to demand real ownership of their brands. Sports companies will have to change how they do business." That evening, Michael drove home to his apartment in Chicago. It was a nice place, but nothing fancy. As he looked around at his simple furniture and basic belongings, he realized that everything was about to change. Tomorrow, he would sign a contract that would make him the first athlete in history to own his own global brand. Within a few years, Jordan Brand could be worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And he would own it. But more than that, he would be opening a door for every athlete who came after him. Kids who were still in high school, playing basketball and dreaming of professional careers, would have opportunities that no previous generation of athletes had ever imagined. The phone rang at 9:15 p.m. It was his mother, Dolores. Michael, I heard on the news that you're signing a big contract with Nike tomorrow. Yes, Mama. The biggest contract any athlete has ever signed. Are you nervous? Michael thought about the question. Was he nervous? He was about to sign a deal worth potentially hundreds of millions of dollars. He was about to become a businessman as well as a basketball player. Everything in his life was about to change. No, Mama. I'm not nervous, I'm excited. Good. Your father and I are proud of you. Not because of the money, but because you're doing something that no one has ever done before. After he hung up, Michael sat in his living room and thought about the journey that had brought him here. From not making his high school basketball team to becoming the first athlete to own his own global brand. He thought about the dinner party at the Palmer House Hilton, where people in expensive clothes had laughed at his chic suit. Those same people would probably read about his Nike deal in tomorrow's newspaper and realize they had completely underestimated him. But most of all, he thought about all the young athletes who would benefit from what he was doing. Kids who would grow up in a world where athletes could be true business partners, not just well-paid employees. The next morning, Michael walked into Nike headquarters wearing a brand new suit. This one was from an expensive store on Michigan Avenue, and it fit perfectly. But as he looked at himself in the lobby's mirror, he realized something important. It wasn't the suit that made him powerful. It was his willingness to bet on himself when everyone else counts him out. At exactly 9 a.m., Michael Jordan signed the contract that would change the sports business forever. As he wrote his name on the final page, he could almost hear Harold Chen's words echoing in his mind. We're not just making you rich, Michael. We're changing how the world thinks about athletes and business. The Air Jordan revolution had officially begun. But what neither Michael nor anyone else at Nike knew was that this was only the beginning. Within 5 years, Jordan Brand would become so successful that it would force every major sports company to completely rethink how they worked with athletes. And the young man in the cheap suit who had been laughed at in a fancy hotel ballroom would become one of the most powerful businessmen in the world. Chicago Bulls practice facility. 5 years later, December, Michael Jordan stood in the empty basketball gym at 6 a.m., shooting free throws in the dim morning light. The same routine he'd followed since high school. But everything else had changed. On the wall hung 3 NBA championship banners. 1991, 1992, 1993. Each one representing a dream that had seemed impossible when he was 15 years old, staring at a bulletin board that didn't have his name on it. But even more than the championships, something else had changed Michael's life forever. Something that started with a phone call 5 years ago in a fancy hotel. His phone buzzed. A text message from Harold Chen. Turn on CNN. You need to see this. Michael grabbed the remote and switched on the small TV in the corner of the gym. A reporter was standing outside the New York Stock Exchange. In business news this morning, Jordan Brand has just been valued at $1.2 billion, making it the most successful athlete brand in history. Michael Jordan, who owns the brand through his revolutionary partnership with Nike, is now officially one of the wealthiest athletes in the world. Michael stared at the screen. $1.2 billion. When he had signed that contract 5 years ago, Harold had predicted Jordan Brand might be worth $1 billion someday. Someday had arrived ahead of schedule. His phone rang. Did you see the news? It was Harold, calling from his office in Chinatown. The same small office above the Chinese restaurant, even though he could now afford to buy the entire building. I saw it. Harold, is this real? It's real, Michael. And you know what this means? What? It means you now have the option to buy Jordan Brand from Nike. Independent experts have valued it at $1.2 billion. According to your contract, you can purchase it for fair market value. Michael sat down on the gym bleachers. Buying Jordan Brand would make him the owner of $1 billion company. He would go from being Nike's partner to being their competitor. Harold, I need time to think about this. Of course you do. But Michael, remember what we talked about 5 years ago. This isn't just about you anymore. Every athlete in the world is watching what you do next. After Harold hung up, Michael looked around the empty basketball gym. This was where it all started. A kid who wasn't good enough, working harder than everyone else, proving that people who count you out do so at their own risk. He thought about the dinner party at the Palmer House Hilton, about Dorothy Hamilton and Janet Morrison, and all the other wealthy people who had looked at his cheap suit and laughed. Where were they now? Still going to fancy dinner parties, still talking about other people's money instead of making their own. But Michael Jordan had built an empire. The gym door opened and Phil Knight walked in. At 56, Knight looked older than his years. Running Nike had taken its toll, but the company was more successful than ever. Largely because of Jordan Brand. "I heard about the valuation," Knight said, sitting down next to Michael on the bleachers. "Phil, I want you to know that whatever I decide, I'm grateful for what Nike has done for me." "Michael, can I tell you something I've never told anyone?" "Sure. 5 years ago, when you walked out of our contract meeting and demanded real ownership, I was furious. I thought you were an ungrateful athlete who didn't understand how business worked." Knight looked out at the basketball court. "But you taught me something important that day. You taught me that the best partnerships aren't about control. They're about shared success." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that if you decide to buy Jordan Brand and become our competitor, I'll respect that decision. You've earned the right to control your own destiny." Michael was surprised. He had expected Knight to try to talk him out of leaving Nike. But Knight continued, "I want to make you another offer first." "What kind of offer?" "I want to offer you something that's never been offered to anyone in the history of business. I want to make you a full partner in Nike itself." Michael stared at him. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I want to sell you 20% of Nike. You would become the second largest shareholder in the company. You would have a seat on our board of directors. You would help make decisions about Nike's future." Knight stood up and walked to the basketball hoop. "Jordan Brand would still be yours to control completely. But instead of competing with Nike, you would be helping to run Nike." "Why would you do that?" "Because I'm 56 years old, Michael. I won't run Nike forever. Someday someone is going to have to take over this company. I can't think of anyone better qualified than the man who revolutionized how we think about athlete partnerships." Michael felt his heart racing. 20% of Nike would be worth more than $2 billion. Combined with Jordan Brand, he would control over $3 billion in assets. "Phil, I need to ask you something. 5 years ago, you hired a detective to follow me. You tried to trap me with a contract that would have controlled me for 20 years. Why should I trust you now?" Knight looked embarrassed. "Because I learned something from that experience. I learned that trying to control people doesn't work. The best way to keep valuable partners is to make them want to stay. And you think making me a Nike partner will make me want to stay? I think making you a Nike partner recognizes what you already are. You're not just our most successful athlete endorser, Michael. You're one of the smartest business people I've ever worked with." Michael thought about everything Harold had taught him over the past 5 years. About thinking long-term. About building something that would last beyond his basketball career. "Can I have a week to decide?" "Take all the time you need." That evening, Michael met Harold for dinner at the same small restaurant in Chinatown, where they had first assembled their team of executives 5 years ago. The restaurant looked exactly the same, but everything else had changed. "So," Harold said over green tea, "Phil Knight offered to make you a Nike partner." "How did you know?" "Because it's exactly what I would do if I were in his position. Keep your most valuable asset by making him an owner instead of an employee." "What do you think I should do?" Harold smiled. "Michael, 5 years ago, you were a basketball player who people laughed at because of your cheap suit. Today, you're being offered partial ownership of a billion-dollar company. That doesn't answer my question. The answer is whatever makes you happiest. You could buy Jordan Brand and compete with Nike. You could become a Nike partner and help run the company. Or you could do something completely different that no one has thought of yet." Harold leaned forward. "But whatever you decide, remember this. You've already proven that people who count you out do so at their own risk. You've already changed how the world thinks about athletes and business. So what's next?" "Next, you help other athletes achieve what you've achieved. You use your success to create opportunities for people who are just starting their journeys." Michael thought about all the young basketball players who looked up to him. Kids who wore Air Jordan shoes and dreamed of professional careers. What if he could help them become business owners too, not just well-paid athletes? "Harold, what if we started our own company? Not a shoe company, but a company that helps athletes build their own brands?" Harold's eyes lit up. "Like a business management company, but focused specifically on athlete ownership?" "Exactly. We could help the next generation of athletes negotiate real partnerships, instead of just endorsement deals." "Michael, that's brilliant. We could change the entire sports industry." As they talked through the evening, Michael realized something important. The dinner party at the Palmer House Hilton had been about more than just his cheap suit or other people's money. It had been about respect, about belonging, about proving that success comes from vision and hard work, not from inherited wealth or family connections. Now, 5 years later, Michael Jordan commanded more respect than anyone in that ballroom had ever dreamed of. But more importantly, he was using that respect to help others who had been counted out, just like he had been. The revolution that started with a phone call in a hotel lobby was just getting started. Palmer House Hilton, Chicago, November 2024. Michael Jordan stood in the same ballroom where it all began, but this time everything was different. At 61, his hair was gray and his face showed the lines of a man who had lived an extraordinary life. But his eyes still held the fire that had driven him from a cut high school player to one of the most powerful businessmen in the world. Tonight, the Palmer House Hilton was hosting a different kind of event. Not a charity dinner for Chicago's elite, but the first annual Athletes as Owners Summit. 500 of the world's most successful athletes filled the room. Basketball players, football stars, tennis champions, soccer legends, all of them were there because of what Michael Jordan had started with a phone call. 35 years ago, Michael walked to the podium as the room fell silent. Behind him, a massive screen showed the Jordan brand logo, now worth over $15 billion. But that wasn't the most impressive number on the screen. The most impressive number was 8047. That was how many athletes now owned their own brands, thanks to the model Michael and Harold Chen had created. 35 years ago, Michael began, his voice carrying clearly through the ballroom. I sat at table 12 in this same room, wearing a cheap suit from Sears. People looked at me and laughed. Not mean laughs, but the kind of laughs that said, "Bless his heart, he's trying." The audience was completely quiet. Every person in that room knew this story, but they had never heard it told by the man who lived it. They laughed because they thought they knew who I was. A basketball player, an athlete, someone who belonged on a court, but not in their world of real business and real money. Michael paused and looked out at the audience. He could see young athletes in the front rows, kids barely out of college who were already building their own business empires. What they didn't know was that I had just made a phone call that would change everything. Not just for me, but for every athlete who would come after me. In the back of the room, Harold Chen sat at a table with Susan Martinez, Robert Kim, and the other executives who had quit their jobs 35 years ago to build something revolutionary. Harold was 97 now, but his eyes were as sharp as ever. That phone call led to a meeting with a man who saw something in me that I didn't even see in myself. A man who taught me that being underestimated wasn't a weakness, it was a weapon. Michael gestured toward Harold, who stood up slowly and waved to the crowd. The room erupted in applause. Harold Chen taught me that the most dangerous people in business are the ones who have been counted out. Because when you've been told you're not good enough, when you've been laughed at, when you've been overlooked, that's when you fight the hardest. Michael clicked a remote, and the screen behind him changed to show a timeline of athlete ownership deals. It started with Air Jordan in 1989 and continued through hundreds of other partnerships over the decades. But here's what I want you to know. The real secret wasn't the Nike deal. The real secret wasn't even Jordan brand becoming worth billions of dollars. The room leaned forward. This was why they were all here, to learn from the man who had revolutionized their industry. The real secret was understanding something that Harold taught me on the night we first met. Americans don't just buy products. They buy dreams. They buy the idea of becoming something better than they are. Michael walked away from the podium, moving closer to his audience. When a kid puts on Air Jordans, they're not just buying shoes. They're buying the dream of flying. They're buying the story of a boy who got cut from his high school team and decided to prove everyone wrong. He stopped in front of a table of young basketball players. When someone wears a Serena Williams tennis outfit, they're not just buying clothes. They're buying the dream of greatness. They're buying the story of a girl from Compton who became the greatest tennis player of all time. The screen changed again, showing photos of athletes from every sport imaginable, all of them now owners of their own brands. Every single person in this room has a story. A story of being told you weren't good enough. A story of people who counted you out. A story of proving everyone wrong. Michael's voice grew stronger. That story, Your story isn't just your personal journey, it's your business plan. It's what you're really selling when you put your name on a product. He returned to the podium. 35 years ago, Harold Chen and I started a revolution. But it wasn't really about money or business deals or even proving people wrong. It was about something much bigger. The room was so quiet you could hear people breathing. It was about changing who gets to control success in America. For too long, athletes were just employees of other people's businesses. Well-paid employees, but employees nonetheless. Michael clicked the remote again. The screen now showed a list of statistics that made everyone in the room sit up straighter. Today, the 47 athletes who own their own brands control over $23 billion in combined wealth. That's money that's staying with the people who earned it, instead of going to corporations that just happened to sign them first. The applause was thunderous. But more than that, we've created something that never existed before. We've created a path for every athlete to become a true business owner, not just a spokesperson. Michael paused and looked directly at the young athletes in the front row. To the young players here tonight, I want you to understand something. You don't have to choose between being a great athlete and being a great business person. You can be both. He gestured to the screen, which now showed photos of successful athlete entrepreneurs from around the world. You don't have to wait for someone else to give you permission to build wealth. You can create it yourself. Michael's voice grew softer, but somehow more powerful. And to everyone in this room, I want you to remember something. The people who laughed at me 35 years ago weren't evil. They just couldn't imagine a world where a basketball player in a cheap suit could build a billion-dollar empire. But we didn't just imagine that world. We created it. The standing ovation lasted for 5 full minutes. After his speech, Michael walked to the back of the room, where Harold Chen was waiting with a cup of green tea and his familiar knowing smile. "How did it feel?" Harold asked. "It felt like coming full circle. In a way, we never left this room," Harold said, looking around the ballroom. "That night, 35 years ago, we planted a seed. Tonight, we're looking at the forest that grew from it." Michael sat down next to his old mentor and friend. "Harold, can I ask you something I've always wondered about?" "Of course. Did you plan all of this? That first meeting, the Nike deal, everything that happened. Was it all part of some master plan you had?" Harold was quiet for a long moment, sipping his tea. "Michael, let me tell you a secret. When I bought that ticket to the charity dinner 35 years ago, I had no idea if you would even show up." "Really? Really? I just knew that if you did show up and if you were the kind of person I thought you were, something interesting might happen." Harold smiled. "The plan wasn't to create a revolution, Michael. The plan was to see what would happen when someone who had been underestimated his whole life finally got the chance to prove what he could do." As the evening wound down and the athletes began to leave, Michael realized something profound. The room that had once made him feel small and unwelcome had become the launching point for the biggest transformation in sports business history. But more than that, it had become proof of something Harold had taught him long ago. When you've been counted out, when you've been laughed at, when you've been told you don't belong, that's not your weakness. That's your superpower. And Michael Jordan had just spent 35 years proving it. I'd love to know, where are you listening from today? Drop your city or country in the comments below. If this story inspired you or taught you something new about turning setbacks into comebacks, please hit that like button. It really helps us share these powerful stories with more people who need to hear them. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for many more fascinating stories like this one. Tales of underdogs who refused to stay down, visionaries who changed the world, and people who proved that your background doesn't determine your future. Finally, if you know someone who needs to hear this message, maybe they're facing their own cheap suit moment, or feeling underestimated, please share this video with your friends and family. Let's spread kindness and awareness together. Because you never know whose life might be changed by learning that being counted out is actually your greatest advantage. Remember, when people laugh at you, they're not seeing your weakness. They're revealing their own lack of vision. Until next time, keep proving the doubters wrong.